In our activity today, we're going to be investigating angles of triangles. And so what we're going to do, we're going to start out with a blank sheet of computer paper. And on that paper, I want you to draw a triangle. The triangle can be any size and does not have to be the same size as your partner's triangle. So I'm going to take my piece of paper here. Here's my blank piece of computer paper, and I'm going to use my ruler and my pencil to help me draw my triangle. And again, you don't want a super small triangle, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to just try to kind of make this, you know, not ultra big, but big enough. So here it can be one side of my triangle. All right, and then I'm just going to draw another side here. That looks good. All right, and now I'm going to connect my two endpoints using my ruler. All right, and that looks good to me. Okay, so there's my triangle. And the next thing that it says on your notes is that you can color the edges of your triangle in a bright color. So if you've got colored pencils or a highlighter, I'm actually going to use orange highlighter here. And I'm just going to trace the edges of my triangle with my highlighter so that I can see it a little bit better. Okay, and there we are. Okay, and now that I've got my triangle highlighted and I can see it really well, I'm going to cut my triangle out. So go ahead and cut your triangle out as well. Alright, so here's my triangle that I have cut out, and again I can still see the orange edges, which is going to be useful for what we're going to do in a moment here. And if you look at your notes next to step 3, it says you are going to rip the corners of your triangle off. And it says make the corners large enough so that they are easy to handle. So I'm going to go ahead and do that with my triangle here. So here's my triangle, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to rip the corners off. So here's one corner of my triangle, and then I'm going to do the same thing to my next corner. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing to my last corner. I'm just going to rip it off there, and I'm making it big enough so that I can use it. Okay, and so there's the 3 corners of my triangle, and the rest of it I'm just going to set aside. I don't need it anymore. Okay, and if I look at my notes now, it says in step 4, arrange your corners so that the colored edge from one corner will touch another colored edge from a different corner. All right, so I'm going to give you a moment to go ahead and do that. Okay, so here's the 3 corners for my triangle, and I'm going to arrange them so that the colored parts are touching each other. So here's my first corner. Okay, and I'm going to make this edge that's colored touch this edge right here on this corner, like so. Okay, and now I've got this colored edge right here, and I'm going to go ahead and make it touch this colored edge right here. So I'm going to go ahead and arrange it like so. Alright, and there's my picture, and so now I'm looking at this and I'm asking myself, well, when I put these 3 corners together, well, what did they form? Okay, and if you look at the bottom, you can see these colors right here. Well, they formed a straight line. Okay, so we can go ahead on our notes and we can write that in step number 5. What do your 3 corners form when you put them together? They form a straight line. Okay, and that should be true for everybody. Everybody's corners should have formed a straight line when you put them together. Now, did you all magically draw the same triangle? Did everyone draw the same triangle as everyone else in the class? Well, of course not. We're not all mind readers. We're not doing the exact same thing. We all made different sized triangles, so we all didn't make the same triangle, but we all had the same result. So it doesn't matter what size triangle you worked with. If you take the angles of your triangle and you put them together, they're always going to form a straight line. So what does this mean about the angles of any triangle when you combine them? Well, since we're all able to take the corners of our triangle and put them together to form a straight line, this means that the angles of a triangle have a sum of 180 degrees. And again, that's true no matter what triangle you used, okay? And again, we all had different triangles that we drew, but we all were able to make a straight line when we put our corners together. So the angles of any triangle, whenever you add them together, the sum will be 180 degrees. And so in question 8, I'm asking, well, what if we had the angles of 30, 45, and 90 degrees? Will those angles form a triangle? So I'll give you a moment right now to think about that. So we just said in question 7 that the angles of a triangle would have a sum of 180 degrees. So what I did, I took the 3 angles and I added them together, and that gave me 165 degrees, but that's not 180 degrees. So I'm going to say no, these angles do not form a triangle because the sum is not 180 degrees. Okay, in order to make a triangle, the angle sum, the 3 angles have to add together to make 180 degrees. And that will be true for every triangle that you work with. Okay, underneath, if we're classifying triangles by their angles, well then there's 3 different triangles that can exist. There's the obtuse triangle, there's the right triangle, and there's the acute triangle. And so let's take a look at each of them individually. The obtuse triangle is called an obtuse triangle because it has one obtuse angle, and I can see that angle right here in the picture. It has one obtuse angle, and if I look at the other 2, well, that's an acute angle right there, and that's an acute angle right there, so then it also has 2 acute angles. But since it has an obtuse angle, we call it an obtuse triangle. Very similar, if we look at the right triangle, it's called a right triangle because it has a right angle. There's one right angle. And if I look at the other 2 angles, this one and this one, they're both acute. 2 acute angles. Whoops, 2 acute angles I should have written there. 2 acute angles. Okay, and again, but since it has one right angle, we call it a right triangle. And then finally, we have the acute triangle, because if we look at this triangle, all 3 of the angles are acute. So if it has 3 acute angles, then it's going to be called an acute triangle.